Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
You'd be hard-pressed to find a life, a career, or a body of work quite like that of our guest today, singer, songwriter, performer, and composer, Jack Williams. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I got to say, reading your bio, it first of all, it's like a small novel. You have accomplished quite a bit in your life, not only as what we just talked about, a singer, songwriter, and a performer, but also in the cuisine world. You're quite the chef, from what I understand, and you've accomplished a lot. Let's get back to the very beginning. How did you get started in all this? You were a Marine. Mm-hmm. Were you musically talented leading up to that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was. Yeah. I started playing in bands when I was a kid. I had a band, I'm going to say 8th grade, when the Beatles came out, probably right around the early 60s. We had a backyard band and we played Beatles songs, and I sang a little bit. I sang All My Lovin' and Twist and Shout. Then Tommy and my buddy Tommy, we had a Beatles band, and we also played Rolling Stones, Paint It Black, and It's All Over Now. That was one song I sang. We had this little backyard band, and then that grew into a band where I played at the prom, and stuff. My dad got me a Hammond C3 organ.
Oh, wow.
Because he didn't want me. He bought me I don't know if you remember the Silvertone guitars that you bought, and they had a case, and you lifted them up, and then the amp stood like that, and you plugged it in and plugged the guitar into the amp. They were classic, and he bought me that. And I started playing rock. I wanted to play rock and roll. And he said, no, you either play country music or I'll take it away from you. And I went, I don't want to play country music. I want to play rock and roll. And he said, well, then I want to take it away from you. And he did. He did. And he gave me one more shot. He said, I'll buy you one more guitar, and I'll teach you Wildwood Flower. If you play Wildwood Flower, I'll let you keep it. So I learned to play Wildwood Flower, and I thought that was pretty cool, but I still wanted to play rock and roll. And then the Vanilla Fudge came out with and that's when I wanted an organ, and it was like, I want to play that.
Wow.
So that's how I got started playing music.
And then you went into the Marines.
Yeah, and then I went into the Marines, and I just wanted to be a warrior, I mean, I had a weird childhood, and it just seemed like the only way I could impress my father was to go in the Marines and do something drastic. So I joined Force Recon and went to jump school and went through all that. And just about the time I was supposed to go to Vietnam, some weird thing happened, which it was a God moment, I guess, because I would have never come back.
Right.
The Force Recon at that time, in Vietnam at that time, the ratio was 1 out of 4 came back, and that person came back without something. So, I mean, it was a death wish. I knew it, but God stepped in or something. It was the day before Christmas, and I was supposed to go home you always go home before you go to Vietnam. And my commanding officer called me into the office, and he said, we got a little snafu here from Washington. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, there's 2 sets of orders here. He said, so I'm going to go outside and smoke a cigarette. And when I come back in, whatever order is there is where you're going. And, something made me decide that I didn't want to go die. And the orders, one order was Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii, to work in Hawaii. And the other one was to Hanoi.
Yeah.
And I ripped up to Vietnam and threw it away and went to Hawaii and started playing music in Hawaii with a bunch of people.
Wow. That's an amazing story. Yeah.
It was God, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, because up to that point, I trained, man. I did all the Force Recon stuff that I jumped out of airplanes, and we had intensive black ops trainings and all that shit. Sorry, all that stuff. And
That's okay. It's a podcast. We can say that stuff.
anyway, but when the moment of truth came, I wanted to live, and I'm glad I made that decision because my outfit didn't come back.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Because we had what I would have been doing got there, and what we would have been doing, we would have been haloing 30 miles on the other side of the DMZ, and 4 of us would have walked all the way back and recorded everything that we saw all the way back and crossed back over to the DMZ. Trying to avoid any firefight we could, but obviously if there was one, we would have had to get into one, and 9 out of 10 times they never could get all the way back.
Right. Oh my gosh.
That's what happened. But I played music in the service, and I wrote songs, and then when I came out, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to play music. I wasn't sure about the songwriting yet, but I knew I wanted to play.
When you say you hadn't really thought about the songwriting yet, is that something that just came naturally to you? You would get an idea and you could go, I know how to transcribe this and turn it into something? How did that part come about?
That part came about twofold. I was living in Atlanta at the time, and Alex Cooley at the time owned Atlanta. He was the promoter. He owned Alex Cooley's ballroom. He owned everything. And he liked me. He took a liking to me. He liked my motivation. He liked that I tried. But at that point, all I did was write. I could play guitar, but everything I did was on paper. So I would write it. He gave me carte blanche. He gave me a backstage pass. He said, I know that you know what to do back there and what not to do. I trust you. So, you can go to any of my shows if that'll help you get somewhere. And so Genesis was there, and they were playing Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, if I remember right. And I wanted to meet Peter Gabriel. And I stood back, and I waited, and I waited, and I was scared, never been backstage before. And, and everybody was somebody, and they were trying to be somebody. And suddenly there he was, and he was just smoking a cigarette. And I just walked up to him, and I said, would you mind looking at a song of mine? And he went, sure, mate, of course. And I reached in my pocket and pulled it out, and he read it. He said, well, this is really good. He said, but this isn't a song. This is a poem. I went, oh, he said, a song is words and music. You do understand that, right? And I went, you said you play guitar or piano? And I said, yeah, I play guitar. He said, well, go home, play your guitar, put this to some kind of music, find somebody you like, listen to how they do it. And, verse, chorus, and he said, and I said, oh, well, thank you. And as I walked away, he said, one more thing. And I said, what's that? He said, the most thing that you'll have to remember the most in your whole life is perseverance and persistence, or you won't get there. And I've never forgotten that. And I am still that guy.
Yeah.
I am still persistent. Just ask Kevin Costner. He told my wife last night on the phone it was her 50th birthday, and I got him to call her for her 50th birthday, and he said, one thing Jack is persistent. And I love that about him.
And we're going to talk about your relationship with Kevin Costner here in a little bit, but
the twofold on that was, so then I got good. I'm the wrong thing. I got to where I could put a song together. Once I could put a song together, then I went back to Alex. And he said, well, you need to do a little demo. I said, what's a demo? And he said, well, we go in the studio and put it down. And he said, I know the right guys. And what's that song in the afternoon? The Atlanta band did. Wasn't the Amazing Rhythms, but it was something in the afternoon. Anyway, that band was session musicians, and he put them all together, and they went in and they sang, and they did 3 songs. And looking back now, they probably were terrible, but they did them, and they made them sound great. And then I was a chef. I was the sous chef at the Abbey. It's still there in Atlanta. And I had a wife. Fast forward, I had a wife and a 9-month-old baby girl, and we were living in Stone Mountain Apartments. And I had White's chef's hat. Well, I was in a car. I didn't have my chef's hat on, but I had the White's Chef Jack, striped pants, and I was on my way to the Abbey, and I went by the Stouffer's Hotel at that time, and there was all these guys standing outside with blue jackets on, and I slowed down and looked, and it said, The Who. Oh, man. And I pulled over and walked up to the first guy I saw, and I said, what's the chances of meeting Roger Daltry? And he said, slim to none, mate. And I went, okay. And I knew I had to get to work, so I just turned around and walked. He said, but wait a minute. He said, what do you want to meet Roger Daltry about? And I said, I'm a songwriter, and I wanted to play him, see if he'd listen to my song. Well, hang on. He got on the house phone, he called up Roger. He said, I got a little songwriter out here who wants to meet you. Okay. All right. Okay, cool. He said, he's busy right now. He said, get you a room. He said, get you a room, and when he has time, he'll talk to you. And I'm going, I got to go to work, but screw work. I'm with The Who, So he got me a room. Doug Clark, still my best friend to this day. He lives in England. He's still Roger's right-hand man. We got a room, and I had my whites on, right?
Yeah.
I said, I can't go to the show in this. I got to go home. How far do you live? I said, well, Stone Mountain's a good little jaunt from here. I said, it'll probably take me 2 hours to go down, change clothes, come back, try to grab my wife. Let's take the limo. So we took the limo and pulls up. I live on the second floor up there, and my wife comes out holding the baby, and she looks down at the limo, and she said, why ain't you at work? And I said, I'm with The Who. I don't care. Get your ass to work. I said, no, we're going to go see The Who. We got backstage. And she went, you're going to go see The Who. I'm not going to go see The Who. And you better not lose that job. And, well, to make a long story short, they had a 3-night stand at the Omni, I believe it was. I can't remember. I think that's what it was. And Roger couldn't see me that night, and I didn't see the show that night. I just stayed with Doug backstage. Couldn't see me the next night. I got fired the next night. Couldn't see me the next night. Now we got to go to Chicago. And they took me to Chicago with them. And I went to the Playboy Mansion with them. And I seen Hugh Hefner. Here I am, 21 years old, on the road. I was part of the team, Now I was part of the little tight-knit team, but I still hadn't met Roger or Pete.
Yeah.
I met Bill Kerbersley, their manager, and Jackie Kerbersley, who are famous to this day, and still, Jackie's dead, but Bill's still alive, and he still manages them. And 5 months later, I ended up in Boston. We went to Philly. I went on a complete tour everywhere. Roger never had time for me, just never had time. I never saw a show either. Never saw a show. And then suddenly, Bill Kerbersley walked up to me one day at backstage, and he said, Roger, ready to see you. It was the last night of the tour. And he said, Roger's ready to see you. Him and Peter are upstairs. And I said, okay. And I went upstairs and I got my guitar, and I went upstairs and I walked in, and Roger was sitting there with like 6 of the prettiest women that you've ever seen in your life. Women that just make you just go, oh my God. And if you haven't been used to seeing women like that. Hey, mate, I know, it's been a while, but play a song. And I was like, sign him up. Bill said, we got the paperwork right here. And they had it was all pre-planned. They had a year's contract, my first publishing deal, and the way it was going to work was I was going to get $100 a week, and they would send it to their American banks, and I would write songs, and once a month, Pete would get on the phone with me. After he listened to songs, Pete would get on the phone with me, and he would talk to me about construction or anything like that, and it was basically going to build, and that's where I really learned how to write songs. That's where he would go, well, what is this shit in this first verse of this song?
Pete Townsend.
Mm-hmm. I got a letter in my house from him about that. And that's how I learned from Peter Gabriel to Pete Townsend. That's how I got my structure of how to put a song together.
Wow.
To answer your question.
We're going to take a break, get a word in for one of our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to have some more of this very interesting conversation with Jack Williams.
Hey, this is Steve Dorff, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena, and believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter-performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives. Whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
You're listening to the Business Side of Music.
Back in the studio, Jack Williams is here talking about really in one of my favorite times of the music generation was the 70s. I think the music was the best it's ever been, and we've talked about that on other shows. You have a Richie Havens story that I've got to hear.
Yeah.
You were persistent on that one, too.
Oh, yeah, that's what got everything really started. That was right during that little period. I was still living in Atlanta. I had done with the Who thing, and Richie came to town, and I was a big fan of Richie's, and as he walked through the backstage area, I asked him if there was any chance that we could get together. I introduced myself, of course, and asked if there was any chance that we could get together after the show and talk music. And he went, of course, I'm staying at the so-and-so. I mean, seriously, he went, I'm staying at the so-so, room so-and-so. Just come by, give me an hour or so to get back, and I'm by myself. Well, I got my girlfriend with me, but yeah, man, yeah, come on. So I did, and I watched him go in his room with Michelle, and Michelle was his girlfriend. I ended up being really close friends with Michelle, and I waited about 40 minutes, and I knocked on his door, and there was no answer. This is like 11 o'clock at night. I waited a half an hour more, and I knocked on and no answer. Midnight, I knocked on the door, no answer. But I could hear him in there. I could hear him. I could smell him. I knew that they were in there. I could hear music. I could hear him playing his guitar, and I could hear him talking. So I knew that they hadn't gone to bed yet. So 1 o'clock in the morning, about 2:30 in the morning, he opened up the door, and he went, "You sure are persistent." And he said, "We saw you out there. I was wondering how long you were going to stay here. Long enough for me to open the door. Come on in." And that was the beginning of that. He ended up, to make a long story short, he saw something in me that he liked, and here's my address, here's my phone number, here's my office, here's everything you need to know. I'll tell Marcia in New York about you. Anytime you need to come to New York, just come to New York, bring your songs, and I'll help you do something. Okay. And that led to, like a month later, taking everything I owned, taking the rent money, taking everything but enough for the groceries for Robin and the baby, and taking everything and jumping on a bus and going up to New York with that demo tape Richie put me up in his houseboat on the 79th Street Boat Basin, and I was going to meet him up at his office the next morning at 10. He came in at 10. He said, let me give you a list. And Ahmet Erdogan, so Clive Davis, call all these guys. At this time, you could actually call their receptionist and get an appointment, using his name, of course. Richie Haven suggested that I called you, and I got an appointment with all of them. And they all threw me out. Clive Davis was the worst. Clive Davis listened to my song, and he went, what the shit is this? And he said, and he reached around, and he pulled out Barry Manilow's newest demo, and he put it in the thing, and he went, this is a song. This is a hit song. And and I went back, I was crying. I was like, I lost all our money. I spent everything. I didn't. Richie said, calm down. He said, tonight we'll go down to my studio in Soho and we'll fix this problem. And we went down to his studio that night, and he did a guitar vocal of one of the songs. Dino played some congas on it, and they just did a little guitar vocal with some congas and Richie playing guitar, and maybe a little bit of another bit. I think his brother played a little guitar on it too. He said, now tomorrow, he said, let's go back to the office and call them all back up and tell them that you and I went in the studio last night and you want to play them something fresh. Just say that. So went back in. First person I went back in was Clive Davis. And I said, I want to play you this. Richie sang this last night. Richie sang it? Uh-huh. Yeah, he thought maybe that might make it a fresher. He didn't listen to it halfway through. He said, I'll do a single song deal on this and give you $1,000 advance. Is that good enough? And I went, wow. Went back to Richie and said, what did we learn from this? I said, I guess it's who you know. And he said, exactly.
Yeah.
And he said, and remember that. And then I went back up there later on, and I spent quite a lot of time up there. We put a band together. He wanted me to sing in front of this band. If I had listened to him, maybe all the stuff that's happening now would have happened a lot earlier. But we put a band together, played the Bottom Line, and then I did a tour with him in England, opening up for him. And it was just kind of like what I'm doing now, basically, only a real small band. It was me on guitar. I had a sax player and a guitar player. It was really eclectic, but a lot of people came to those shows. I mean, Dave Mason came to one of the shows, and he was in this old ratty shirt and everything, and he came up to me and he went, man, this is cool stuff. Richie was standing next to me, and he said, this is really cool stuff. And I was like really cocky back then. I was like, yeah, cool, thanks, man. And he walked away, and Richie said, how rude. He said, do you know who that was? And I went, no. He said, that was Dave Mason. He said, you should have shown him a little bit more respect. He said, don't be like this. And he taught me how to be a person with people. And so I got that from him, From that point on, I was never cocky ever again with anybody, because it embarrassed me, and then he did it in front of everybody. And so that's where I learned how to be a good person in front of people, I guess is the word you want to know, That's my Richie Havens story.
A little forward to Uriah Heep. How did that all come together? Was that after Richie?
During.
Mm-hmm.
End of the year's contract with The Who, Uriah Heep was on an American tour. And my two favorite songwriters ever, Don Henley and Ken Hensley. Two sides of the board, I know, but Ken Hensley wrote the greatest stuff for Uriah Heep. Demons and Wizards and July Morning and Look at Yourself. Some of the greatest rock stuff, really melodic, really well-written lyrics, well-written songs. And I wanted to meet him. Same thing happened. I focused on it, and I met him backstage at the show. And he said, you know where we're staying? And I said, yeah, and because Alex helped me out with all that. He said, well, meet me in the bar after the show. He said, we're all going to be in the bar. He said, we'll be in the bar an hour after the show. Meet me there and we'll talk. And sure enough, they did, and we hit it off. We really did. We had a lot of fun talking, and I gave him my cassette tape. I gave him that demo thing, and he said, I'll call you. I really will. I'll call you and let you know what I think. Never heard from him for about 6 months, and about 6 months later, the phone rang one day, and I answered the phone, and he said, Jack, and I said, yeah, and he said, Ken Hensley. I went, hey. He said, how'd you like to move to England? And I went, really? He said, yeah. He said, we want you to work in our publishing company. And he says, and you'll probably end up getting a song or two on Uriah Heep's records, which no one's ever done outside the band.
They had always done everything internally, right?
Uh-huh. And he says, I got you a little apartment near me. I live in Henley-on-Thames, across the street from George Harrison. I still don't believe that this all, But he said, Alvin Lee's my neighbor, and you'll get to hang out with all of them. He said, I got you an apartment, I got you a car, and he said, I'll give you $100 a week. No, I think it was about 70 quid a week, which comes to about 125 a week. And he said, one thing though, Jack. And I said, what's that? He said, I can't bring your family. So this is going to have to be a long-distance relationship to see how this works out. Maybe down the road, but right now, it's just you. And Robin and I weren't getting along at that point anyway. Things were really bad. Things went bad from the Who thing. Went bad anyway. And, I just went, Ken Hensley, fame and fortune, rotten family life in Atlanta. No choice. I'm going to England. So I did. And I got over there, and that was successful part of my career, number one. That's where many, many great things happened. That's where Ronnie Van Zant and I became great friends, and Gary and Rosie and Skinner and I, we regrouped over there. That's where I met Jimmy Page. That's where I've got a demo with Ken Hensley, Simon Kirke, Mick Rouse, Alvin Lee, and George Harrison on it, of a song that they just happened to be in the studio that night when we did a demo of my song.
Oh my gosh!
I just hung out with those guys, and those years were the great years. And talk about being around that music back then. I mean, Uriah Heep. There was a down in the middle of London. There was a rehearsal hall that all the big rock bands used, and it was 3 floors. And at this point, Uriah Heep was getting ready for the next American tour, and they had the bottom floor. Jethro Tull had the middle floor, and Led Zeppelin had the top floor. And I had carte blanche because I was a songwriter with Uriah Heep. They were recording one of my songs, and so I got to know the Roadies and the other bands, and I got to know everything, and I got to hang around. And I tell the guys, I was telling Tom Bukovac the other day, we were talking about the difference between bands these days and the bands of those days. You're right. Those bands rehearsed 8 hours a day, 8 weeks, before they went to the studio and before they went on the road. These were today's bands. They don't do that kind of stuff. But it was amazing. Like with Led Zeppelin, they would all be there except for Page. And there'd be a big urn, a tea urn, because everybody in England drinks tea, And everybody mulling around, drinking it, everything hooked up, everything. And then a limo would pull up. Jimmy Page would get out with his guitar. He'd walk in, he'd say hi to everybody, just really friendly. He'd go upstairs, he'd walk down, open up his guitar, strap it on, walk up there and go 1, 2, 3, 4, and they'd do their show. They'd do a 2-hour show nonstop, just with all the ad-libs, with everything you could think of. And then they would do the 2 encores, and they'd say, see you tomorrow, boys, and he'd get back in the car and leave. It was just something to see at my age, It was
I think at anybody's age,
it was an education.
Yeah.
Just to watch how people did all that stuff. And that's where I got my work ethic. I got my work ethic from being around those guys because it was real and it was hard work, and songwriters, Jackson Browne and Ronnie Van Zant and Ken Hensley, they were true songwriters. I mean, they sat down and they crafted their song, and it was good. It was real heart songwriting. And that's when I came back over here after I left there.
And that got you into the Southern rock scene, right?
Sort of. No, not really. I mean, yeah. Ronnie and I became the best. Skinner and I, we're all from Florida, so we became really close friends. And Ronnie and I were going to do some stuff, and then the plane crashed, and everybody went their separate ways. But I hooked back up with Greg and Dickie in Florida, and put a band together in Florida, and Dickie produced it. And then when that was all said and done, I didn't know what to do because I had come back here. My time in England was done. My visa, there was no sense of staying there anymore. Uriah Heep was about to break up. Their stuff, I had songs on their records. Everything was done. I was in the middle of a divorce here. I was playing music, but I didn't know what to do. I was a songwriter now, a real full-fledged pro songwriter. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know, do I go to New York and hang out with Richie? Do I go to L.A.? And I didn't even think about Nashville. Nashville wasn't even in my... And Dickie Betts said, you're a songwriter. You need to live where songwriters live. And he said, and I'll help you. He said, come with me to Nashville. I got a little house in Green Hills. You could stay in the basement. My manager is Joe Sullivan of Sound 70. He managed Charlie Daniels too. And he says, and Joe can make some calls for you. And he did. He called Noel Fox, called all Tim Whipperman, called them all. I had meetings with them all. And Noel signed me to Silver Line, Gold Line. And that was the beginning of my thing. And that was about 84.
We're going to take another break, get another word in for one of our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to find out what Jack Williams is up to these days. He's got a new project coming out and his work with Kevin Costner.
Hey, everybody, this is Heidi Newfield, and you are listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Are you curious about Gordon Lightfoot's songwriting process, or what it was like working with Prince in the 80s? Have you ever given any thought to what goes into a golf course design or writing a book? I'm Steve Waxman, the host of The Creationist, a podcast about people who create. Each episode features a different creator sharing stories that I hope will inspire your own creativity. The Creationist is available now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
One day they're gonna catch you running from yourself. And when they do, they'll bury you in the pits of hell. Don't beg for your salvation with all the damage done. Keep running on. Running on. What's in your heart sticks with you everywhere you go. Can't lose those screaming demons that have hijacked your soul. The monsters that chase you down are there from dusk till dawn. Keep you running on.
Back in the studio, Jack Williams is sitting across the microphone from us. We're going to fast forward now. And what you said during the break, you and Kevin Costner got together, about 7 years ago or so?
Yeah.
And how did that come about? And you've been doing some work with Kevin because of that.
We've gotten to be really good friends. I mean, the best of friends. That started me doing me. I said to my wife, I want to work with Kevin Costner. Okay. And I started after it. You know, red flags. And then suddenly, investigation, and suddenly I found this little thing somewhere in the whole thing was Kevin Costner and Modern West. He's got a band. Okay, now let's dig a little further. And two of his band members live in Nashville. And one has a studio right next to Blackbird in the Creative Workshop in Buzz Cason studio. And he's got an email address. I'm in. It's like I wrote Teddy and I went, Teddy, my name's Jack. Whenever I do stuff like this, I always go, here's my bio, so that you know that I'm for real and that, I'm not just somebody off the street. Let's have a cup of coffee and talk. Sure, let's do it. So we did. Teddy said, what do you really want? And I said, I want to work with Kevin. And he said, okay, I like your honesty. He said, but Kevin's very organic. Everything has to come out of the circle. So you got to write with me or Park or somebody, and it's all gradual. So I said, okay, let's write. So the first song we wrote is a song called Heaven So Far Away. Everything that Teddy does, everything I do now, he sends to Kevin. Kevin fell in love with that song. He wanted to record it. Teddy flew out, they recorded it. It ended up being in part of their show. And Teddy and I kept writing, and about every third or fourth song, Kevin wanted it. And then fast forward 2 years maybe of doing this, Kevin was going to do a little 5-stop tour. Start 2 dates in Fort Myers and then this big rock club in Knoxville. Teddy said, why don't you ride? I'm going to drive up there. So why don't you ride with me? And he said, you can help me drive back. And he said, we can keep each other company. He said, show ain't till 11. Sound checks at 3. And then I'm going to sleep. Everybody's going to sleep. So you're on your own. Can you do that? And I said, yeah, I can do that. I don't care. I watched the sound check. Didn't meet Kevin. He just walked in and did his sound check. And everybody went to bed. And I was out in the parking lot on my phone talking to Kathy, my wife. Somebody came up and tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around, big tall guy, and he said, hey, I'm Tim. Are you Jack? And I said, yeah. He said, Kevin wants to talk to you on the bus. And I opened the door, and he was there, T-shirt, jeans, barefooted, working on a script. And he put the script down, he got up, and he said, one question. And I went, what's that? He said, how'd you like how I sang your song? And I looked at him, and I said, you could sing shit, and I would have loved it. And that's exactly what I said to him. And I said, no, man, I loved what you did. It was great. Shook hands, and he said, sit down. And we just started talking, and one thing led to another. And we finally got to this point where he said, what do you think of the band? I said, oh, man, his band is really good. They really are. They're kick-ass. And I said, the band is great. The songs are great. You're great. But he must have heard something in my throat. And he said, but. And I said, no buts. He said, yeah, I hear a but. And Mark Gillard, his right-hand guy, is an editor. You hear a butt, Mark? Mark said, yeah, I hear a butt. I said, all right. I said, 2 of those songs, I said, you need to rekey. And he went, what do you mean by rekey? I said, they're too high for your voice. You just need to bring the key of the song, like if they're in A, you need to bring them down to G, so you're not straining your voice, because you sing low and raspy, and I said, you're up there at the top of your voice, and you're cracking. That's what I've been trying to tell the goddamn man for the last 2 years. And so the band walks on, right? I've never met the band at all. Band walks on. Teddy's not with him at this point. It's everybody, and I hadn't met him. And they walked on, and he goes, Jack says we need to rekey these 2 songs. And they looked at me like, who are you to even... But Teddy walked on, and he went, I've been telling you guys that same thing. Jack's right. They rekeyed it on the spot, and from that point on, a month later, I was at his house in Santa Barbara, and we were talking music, and he said to me, I have a dream that's never been fulfilled. I said, you have a dream that's never been fulfilled? And he said, yeah, I do. He said, the band, he said, they've been with me for 15 years. And he said, we've done a lot of great things. He said, but one thing we've never done. He said, I've never been able to have a song. I never heard my voice on the radio. He said, you think you could help me do that? And I said, yeah, without even giving it a second thought. Not about a clue. I mean, I've been in the business long enough that I could figure it out. I said, of course I could. I said, but not with any of these songs. Honestly, I said, there's not a radio song in the bunch. And I said, so you'd have a hard time with that, even with your name. Well, write it. I said, well, Teddy and I'll write it. So we did. We wrote a song called Love. And then he said the parameters. He said, okay, here's the parameters. I can't do a radio tour because I make movies. And he said, I'm getting ready to go make one pretty soon. He said, so I can't do that. He said, money? I'll spend some money, but we got to talk about it each time. Make sure it's the right thing to do. I said, okay. He said, but now phone calls? He said, I'll make any phone call you want. I'll talk to anybody you want me to talk to, as long as we do it on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and we do it between 9 o'clock in the morning and 11 o'clock in the morning my time, and it's pre-recorded. Nothing live. I don't like live interviews because things can go wrong, and I want it to be edited. Can you do that? And I went, yeah. I went home. I called a buddy of mine up in Detroit who I knew radio really well. And I said, want to help me get a Kevin Costner song on the radio? And he went, yep. And so I went and got Ann Chrisman, and we hired her, and we told her the ball game, got it to number 27 in the Music Row charts, and made his dream come true. We've been best friends ever since. Yesterday was Kathy's, my wife's birthday. He called me about the song that we're doing on the record, and we were talking about it, and I said, would you do me a favor? I said, I've never asked you any favor in our lifetime. And I said, but it's Kathy's 50th birthday, and she's never met you, and she's pretty much knows you through me. Would you mind giving her a call and wishing her a happy birthday? It'll blow her mind. And he said, of course. And about 8 o'clock last night, we had company. Kelly, we had a couple of people over for dinner, and Kathy goes, this is Kathy. Yeah, he said you might be calling. And they were just talking for 20 minutes. And then Kelly was there. Kelly was my lawyer, did all my contracts. And Kelly's like beet red. And Kathy's going, my girlfriend Kelly is standing here and she's beet red. And he's got Kevin on the speakerphone.
Yeah.
And Kevin says, well, then be a good girl and let me speak to Kelly. And Kelly goes, and he goes, hey, Kelly, how you doing? And Kelly goes, I'm doing all right, Kevin. How are you doing? And I'm watching all this go down, and just my heart's beating big. It's like, this is great. Thank you for doing that. That's what kind of guy he is, and that's the kind of relationship we have. And we have a song on my record that he's heard. And both times that we've been in the studio, he wanted to be zoomed in. So when Tom Bukovac came to play the other day and play guitar, he was zoomed in, and he told me yesterday, man, I love talking to Tom Bukovac and Adam Box. Guys are so great. He didn't get to talk to people like that very often, you know. And then Jim Moose Brown put keyboards on it 2 weeks ago, and I zoomed him in for that, and he met Moose, and he loved talking to Moose, and so that's the kind of relationship we have.
Your new project now, you've been working on this for a while?
Well, yeah. When I signed with Anthem, I did this EP, and Anthem thought that my voice and TV would be a good mix. And you have to understand that all my life I never sang. I sang with Richie, because Richie thought I had a real unique voice and I should do it. But once I started writing songs for people in Nashville, I knew better. I knew I had to hire gunslingers to sing the right songs to get cuts, and my voice was never going to do it. So I stopped until about a year or 2 years ago. And Scott, who owns Dual Tone Records, that has the Lumineers, him and Kevin and Jill Goddard, who's over at Anthem, they heard me singing at a writer's night and said, why don't you start doing what you do now? And Jill said, you need to do what you do. You get a lot of TV and sync if they hear your voice. And so Adam Box from the Brothers Osborne, he had a studio, and he said, I'll produce it. So we did, and we got that. And then Anthem signed me, and then Drew Sherrod over there asked me if I'd do a version of Wonderful World, my way.
The Louis Armstrong hit, yeah.
So we did, and we just did a really different, really eclectic. Have you seen the video?
I saw the video, yeah.
We did it, and then Adam.
It's almost very haunting the way it's done.
Well, the tracks were all done, and then Adam. It was right before the election when all hell was breaking loose in America, and Adam said, "Let's do It's a Wonderful World, and let's show tragedy and beauty, and tragedy and beauty." And I said, as long as we end with beauty. I said, I want it to end positive. And so we did. And we're in the middle of a record now. And I've got people like Dwayne Betts from the Owen Betts Band. He just played on it. Drew Smithers from Bishop Gunn. He just played on it. Tim Quicks from Kevin Bacon's band. He's about to play on it. Gary Rosington called me yesterday, and him and Ricky Medlock are going to play on 2 songs. Moose played on it. Heidi's got a song on there with me, and she's going to sing background and play harp on that song.
Heidi Newfield. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's going to be it's going to be like that. When you hear that, it'll be similar to that, but I think the songs are the best songs I've ever written in my life on this album. They're just really, I reached in and got all the truth I could find.
You really got your A game going on this one, don't you?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know why it waited. But see, that's what Richie said. Richie was an astrologer to the max, and he did my chart when I was 20. And when he finished doing my chart, he said, I got good news and bad news. He said, you are going to be extremely successful. I said, yeah? He said, yeah, but not till really late in life. And I remembered that, but I didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's really late in life. And things are happening now that should have happened should happen when I was younger. So, yeah.
But you persevered and you were persistent and you made it.
Yeah. Well, I'm too old to be a hit songwriter right now. I mean, these young guys have got that game written up. So what else can I do to keep my music alive? Well, I want to write for TV and film. That's really what I want to do, and I want to compose. And so I've made friends in that world. He's talking to one today, John Hardy, and he's another one. I watched a show called Hinterland on Netflix and went, oh my God, who did the music to that? And I looked it up and I saw it was John Hardy, and I went, John Hardy. My God, he's done this, he's done this, he's done this. Reached out to him. We've gotten the best of friends. Like my wife would tell you, him and I he had never met an American songwriter, and I have never met a classical composer. So the song that we wrote together is on my record. For him to do a piano vocal, he had to do 15 pages of score. That's how he did it. He did that score for him just to do a piano. He couldn't do it like I just sit down with a guitar and go da-da-da-da-da-da. No, he had to do the whole thing for him to do a piano vocal. And it's just two sides, but we're the best of friends, and we do work together, and it's great.
Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a fabulous journey.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.